cabin was listed under a fake-sounding name, Ridgeview Retreat, but it was cheap, remote, and available for 5 nights during spring break. We were 4, college students with time to waste and enough cash pooled together to rent something out of the way. The place had no neighbors, no reception, and one photo that looked like it had been taken in the early 2000s. That was the appeal. It sat halfway up a sloped hill, surrounded by pine and fir, with a gravel driveway barely wide enough for 1 car. A handwritten message taped to the front door read, "Key in lockbox under the front step. Please read the cabin guide in the coffee table drawer before using any utilities." Inside, it smelled like dry wood and old curtains. The layout was simple: 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living room that faced the trees. There were scratches on the wood floor near the fireplace, and scuff marks under the windows. The furniture looked rearranged. We unpacked fast. 1 cooler was already half empty. The plan was to unplug and do nothing. No connection, no signal, no distractions. Later that evening, while the others were digging out cards and fighting over beds, I opened the drawer in the coffee table. The binder wasn't what I expected. It wasn't printed, laminated, or even labeled. Just a thick stack of yellowed pages bound with 2 metal rings. The first page read, "Rules for Ridgeview," written in blue ink, all capital letters, underlined headings, no introduction. I read the first few out loud. No one responded. When I kept reading, someone threw a beer can at me. Rule 1. Cover all windows after sunset. Curtains must overlap. Rule 2. No food or drink left outside after 6:30 p.m. Rule 3. If tapping is heard on the windows after dark, do not respond. Rule 4. No fires after 11 p.m., indoors or out. Rule 5. Lock both front and back doors by 8 p.m. Do not open them again until sunrise. Rule 6. If knocking is heard from inside the walls, say aloud, "You are not welcome here." Rule 7. All footwear must be kept indoors overnight. If shoes are found outside in the morning, do not bring them back in. Rule 8. Do not leave flashlights or headlamps outside overnight. Rule 9. If lights flicker more than once, turn them off and stay still. Rule 10. If someone leaves after sunset and does not return before midnight, do not unlock the doors. Rule 11. If a voice outside says your name, ignore it. Rule 12. If the binder is gone, leave immediately. The rules no longer apply. Nothing about the stove, nothing about septic tanks or water usage, just rules. No names, no contact number, no date. That night we played cards until almost 1. Someone had started a fire in the living room, even though we weren't cold. I made a point of locking both doors before 8 and pulling the curtains tight. No one else seemed to care. By midnight, the cabin was dark except for the dying fire and a flashlight propped up on a backpack. I woke at 3:12 a.m. to footsteps on the porch. They moved slowly across the front deck, then along the side of the house, not dragging, not rushed, just even steady pacing. I sat up but didn't move closer to the window. The curtain was drawn. There were 3 taps. Light, deliberate. Then, nothing. The floorboards didn't creak again. No one else stirred. By morning, there was a shoe on a stump in the yard. Just one. The other was inside, by the door. The guy it belonged to didn't remember leaving it out there. I didn't mention Rule 7. The second day was warmer. We hiked up the hill behind the cabin and came back with scratches and 2 ticks between us. That evening, someone left a paper plate out back with half a sandwich on it. They forgot about it. At 9, I remembered. I checked the porch. The plate was gone, so was the sandwich. The beer can next to it was sitting upright, wiped clean. I locked the doors again. I closed the curtains. No one helped. At 1:04 a.m., the window beside the couch tapped twice. Then again. I stayed where I was. The tapping stopped. On the third night, 2 of them went out with flashlights to explore the trail behind the house. I reminded them casually about Rule 10. They laughed and said they'd be back in under an hour. They left at 9:40. At 12:18, someone knocked on the back door. 3 knocks, calm, even. The front door knocked at 12:36. Same pattern. I didn't open anything. I slept near the fireplace, awake until the sun came up. At 6:44, I unlocked the back door. Both of them were sitting on the steps. Their eyes looked tired, but not scared. One of them had lost a sock. The other didn't say anything. No one mentioned the knocks. I didn't ask. We packed early the next day. No one said it, but the air in the place had shifted. Someone misplaced the car keys and spent an hour searching. Another claimed their phone battery drained overnight, even though it had been on airplane mode. There was a faint burn mark near the outlet by the kitchen. No one remembered plugging anything in there. I opened the coffee table drawer around noon. The binder was gone. In its place, taped flat against the bottom of the drawer, was one clean sheet of paper. No heading, no formatting. It said, "If the binder is gone, do not come back. The rules no longer apply." We left before the sun dropped behind the trees. Nobody argued. The listing disappeared a week later. Out of habit, I saved the GPS coordinates on my map app. The cabin is still marked, but nearby, about 2 kilometers northeast, there's another structure listed. No access roads, no name, just unnamed building. That marker vanished from the map the next time I checked. I haven't looked for it since. We arrived in groups, scattered between cheap taxis and borrowed cars. The beach was mostly empty by midnight except for us. Music came from a Bluetooth speaker buried halfway in a backpack. Everyone drank whatever they brought. Someone dug a fire pit that smoked more than it burned. I stayed mostly quiet. It was public land, but there were no patrols, no homes nearby. A few collapsed huts farther down the coast looked abandoned. Someone had told us this stretch used to be part of a resort in the 80s, but it never reopened. The sand was uneven, sharp in places. By 1 a.m., the fire had dropped to embers. Half the people had passed out on towels. A few sat in circles, sharing weed pens and arguing about who'd stolen the vodka. There were 16 of us total. Most knew each other loosely, friends of friends from campus, locals on spring break, 2 girls from out of town. I only knew 3 people well. One of them was Andrea. She was the kind of person who stayed in every photo without trying. The type that gets followed around all night with drinks and compliments. She'd been dancing on and off since we arrived, barefoot, hair in knots from the wind. Around 2, she left the group for the first time. No one followed. I didn't notice until 20 minutes later, when someone started asking if anyone had seen her. They thought she might have gone for a swim. Someone else joked she was with the guy who brought the music. The speaker was still there. He wasn't. No one stood up. The fire was gone by then. Wind had buried half the coals. I remember that part clearly, standing at the edge of the group and watching how fast the beach seemed to flatten out past a certain distance, like the ocean was swallowing its own tracks. We called her name a few times. No one answered. Someone said she'd gone to the bathroom behind the dunes, but the sand showed no footprints past the cooler. No one was sure when they'd last seen her. A few pulled out phones and tried to check timestamps on photos. Her phone didn't ring. We searched for 40 minutes. At first near the fire pit, then up along the dunes, then toward the edge of the brush, where the road curved back inland. 2 guys checked the empty huts. Another called her roommate back at the hotel. She wasn't there. By 3:05, people started leaving. Some wanted to call the police. Others said she'd probably left with someone and would text in the morning. There wasn't a clear plan, and no one took charge. Eventually, it was just 4 of us still looking. I went back to the fire pit and waited. Her sandals were still next to a crushed can. Her bag was there, zipped. Her phone was gone. Around 4:10, someone finally found it, buried in the sand 10 meters from the dunes. Screen cracked, but working. No missed calls. One unsent message still open. A single photo in the preview. Bar that hadn't been there earlier. We opened it. It had been taken with the front camera. The frame was angled. Andrea's face half lit by the flash, caught mid-step. Behind her, less than 10 meters away, a figure crouched low behind the dune ridge, facing the camera, not moving. The face was unclear. The eyes caught the flash. It didn't look like anyone we knew. No one said anything for a long time. We brought the phone to the hotel desk. Police were called around 6. A report was filed. We were asked to stay local. 2 days later, her bag was returned to the station. It had been dropped anonymously at the fire station in a plastic bag. Nothing missing except the phone. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. The man from the photo was never identified. Local authorities cross-checked tourist rentals, camera logs, resort workers, transient offenders. Nothing matched. The case was suspended. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of assault, no financial motive, no ransom. The officer in charge said it was possible she got disoriented and wandered too far, that the photo was likely a coincidence. They couldn't prove the timestamp was real. The beach was combed for 4 days. Nothing turned up. Her photo circulated online for a few months. Conspiracy forums dissected the shadow in the corner, the curve of the dune, the quality of the flash. A few people claimed to recognize the man. All of them were dismissed. I kept one copy of the image. What stood out wasn't the man. It was her eyes. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking past it, down and to the left, towards something just out of frame. It didn't look like she meant to take a picture. No one saw her again. The weather had held steady for 3 days straight, mid-60s dry, with a thin cloud cover that made the sun tolerable. We were staying at a cheap spring break rental near a state forest, 2 hours from anything resembling a city. The original plan was to hit the lakes, but one was closed for algae, and the other had too many kids. So on day 3, we voted for a hike. The trail we picked wasn't listed on the park board. It was drawn in marker on a paper map nailed to the trailhead post. just a narrow line cutting through the northwest corner of the forest marked Ridge. There was no distance written, just a short note next to the line. Not maintained. Use at own risk. That was enough to make one person back out. The rest of us went anyway. There were 5 total. I only knew 2 of them before the trip. The trail was narrower than it looked on the map. It started well enough, flat, well-trodden, shaded in parts, but the farther we got, the more it seemed like it hadn't been used in a while. Deadfall crisscrossed the dirt, thick brush pressed in around the turns, no trail markers, no mileage signs, no fences. Within 20 minutes, we'd passed the point where the trail split from the main path. After that, we saw no one. For the first hour, conversation filled the time. We joked about who would tap out first. Some talked about music. One of them mentioned bringing mushrooms. Nobody responded. By the 3rd hour, the elevation started changing. The trail curved upward along a ridge. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make the footing less certain. The brush cleared a bit. Pines grew in tighter groups, casting long shadows between them. One of the guys had a Fitbit and kept checking the steps. His phone had no signal, but it was still tracking distance. He said we'd passed the 6-mile mark, but the trail kept going. The first odd thing we noticed was the water bottle. It was propped upright on a smooth rock beside a turn in the trail, half full, cap sealed, not dusty or weathered. We passed it without stopping. About 20 minutes later, we came across a sweatshirt, dark blue, folded once, set on a log like someone planned to come back for it. Still no one else in sight, not even distant voices or branches snapping, just us and the trail. The guy in the back asked if we should head back. He wasn't out of breath, but he kept glancing over his shoulder more than forward. No one answered him. We walked for another half hour before we saw the glove. It was hanging from a tree branch about 7 feet up. Right side out, black nylon, the kind sold in packs of 3 at gas stations. It hadn't fallen or blown there, it had been placed. From the trail, we could see the inside. A single streak of red ran down the palm, thickest near the base of the thumb, drying toward the wrist opening. None on the outside. The branch bent slightly under the weight. No one said anything. One of the girls took a photo. 10 minutes after that, we stopped walking. There were no more trail markers. In fact, there hadn't been any for miles, but the path had kept going. Now the dirt vanished under rock and leaves. A fork in the trail appeared that wasn't on the map. The line had shown a single path. One of the guys left a mark on a tree with a pocket knife before we turned around. Just a line across the bark. Someone else left a plastic water bottle at the split. We agreed to retrace our steps directly. We walked back in silence. Around the 2-hour mark, we passed the tree again. The glove was gone. The branch was still bent the same way. The line carved into the bark at the trail fork was still visible. But the glove wasn't there. The branch wasn't broken or disturbed. Just empty. We didn't stop. The guy in front picked up the pace. Everyone followed. No one complained about being tired. A few turns later, we passed a shirt we hadn't seen on the way in. It was gray, inside out, draped across a branch at eye level. We didn't stop for that either. At some point, the trail started sloping down again. The path widened. We recognized a clump of fallen trees we'd climbed over earlier in the day. That was the first clear sign we were on the right track. After that, someone mentioned hearing a sound up the hill to our left. No one else acknowledged it. When we got back to the trailhead, it was nearly sunset. The parking lot was empty. We didn't talk much in the car. 2 of them fell asleep. The others scrolled through their phones in silence. I was in the back seat with the guy who'd taken the photo of the glove. He was swiping through his camera roll, deleting most of them. He stopped on one. It wasn't the glove photo. It had been taken later, somewhere along the ridge before the trail disappeared. In the photo, the group is visible from behind. 4 people walking ahead, not looking back. The trees on either side frame them. To the right of the group, between 2 trunks, there's a man, standing still half behind a tree, facing the camera. Dark clothes, knees bent slightly, like he was mid-step. Face partly shadowed, but not completely. Eyes visible. The guy holding the phone didn't react. He just turned off the screen and pocketed it. When we got back to the rental, no one brought up the hike. We spent the next 2 days by the lake. He never showed that photo to anyone else. The last day before we left, I asked to see it again. He told me he'd deleted it. Not by accident. The expression on the man's face hadn't looked confused, or startled, or even threatening. It looked patient.